Welcome to this Yarmouth Isle Regional Council meeting. We, the councillors of the Yarmouth Isle region, declare that we will undertake the duties of the office of councillor in the best interest of our community and faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authority and discretions vested in us to the best of our skill and judgment. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. The Yarmouth Isle regional community pays tribute to their love of land, love of people and love of culture. Now this meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recordings of the non-confidential parts of the meeting will be made available on the internet. No other persons are permitted to record the meeting unless specifically authorised to do so. Now we have 5 people as coming to have your say. All speakers are requested to ensure their comments are relevant to the particular agenda item. The chairperson may withdraw the privilege to speak where a speaker makes personal remarks or criticisms or uses abusive or inappropriate language. Speakers do not enjoy any special protection arising from comments made during council meetings and should therefore refrain from making defamatory remarks or personal defamatory statements against any individuals. For those who are having your say, it's 5 minutes, and there will be an indicator on the bottom left end of the screen indicating the time, and I will cut you off at the 5 minutes. Please, mobile phones, can you switch them on to silent or turn them off, please? Thank you. We have an apology from Councillor O'Brien, so could I move it? Councillor Withers, Councillor Gray, all those in favour? Thank you. Disclosures of interest, councillors. Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's just item 9.2, Part B. I have a possible pecuniary interest as a primary producer, so I will leave the chambers when that item comes up.
Councillor Gillespie.
I've got a non-pecuniary, non-significant part with the DA, if you want me to write, which is item 12.4, that I have spoken and met with these with one of the party before the DA had been put into council. Thank you.
Councillor Robertson.
And also for item 12.4, I have horses on my property even though I don't buy feed for them and I don't own them. So I have a non-significant, non-pecuniary.
Thank you, councillors. I too have a conflict with item 9.2/B on the same reasons as Councillor Martin. As a consequence, when that item comes up, I will vacate the chair, and I've asked Councillor Bailey to go through that part of the motion. So,
hang on. In relation to 9.2, which is my motion, I am a primary producer, but I see that as not a conflict because I'm just one member of this community. I'm just a category of the community.
So, coming to have your say, the have your say has been on the order in which people lodge their application. So the first is Katie Roberts. So Katie, if you can just explain, go through, can you see the timer on the, oh, it might have just started. Yep, that's timer on the bottom left-hand side there.
Okay.
So thank you.
Hi, I'm speaking on behalf of all of the neighbours in an objection to the matter regarding the 5 to 9 Drew Street, which is later in this agenda. Group 1 feeds are running their business there at the moment, and it has actually been quite destructive to our neighbourhood. They've been operating without permission for several months, and what they are requesting in this application has actually already occurred, and the buildings have already been built. My family and I have lived in Drew Street for 10 years, and we understand that it is light industrial zoning, but we've never had an issue with any other business before. This is the first one we've had problems with. We're concerned that if this application gets approved, Group 1 feeds will be able to run to their full potential and this disturbance will only become worse than what it already is. Now I have some photos quickly just to show you of the area, just so that you're aware of where we're talking about. So the Silcar building is actually where Group 1 feeds is. This house right there is my family home. Next photo, please. That last one just shows the gap between my house, which literally is my bedrooms that run right alongside the business where the noise is happening. These are the neighbours that are operating, that are straight across the road from the operation that are also highly impacted by the noise. Keep going, please, with the photos. So this is my sister's yard in 8 Shamrock Avenue, where the silos are directly at the back of her back fence. She also is impacted by the noise. Next, please. There's 2 letters here that say that the owner of the Silcar building and the people in the business at New England Glass, the surrounding neighbours agreed to the business going ahead. We were never asked, nor did we ever agree to this business occurring in our street. Next photo, please. And again, sorry. That it is causing on our daily lives. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Katie. Now, councillors, because it's contentious, I will allow questions to the speakers if there are any. Okay, the second speaker is Trevor Stace.
I too am speaking against the development application at number 9 Drew Street. Council Planning Department has recommended that this application be refused by Council. So the repercussions of any future incidents related to their silos and processing of these grains comes back to whoever votes for this to go ahead. A lot has been mentioned about exemptions and zoning criteria based on, is it a farming operation, agricultural operation, rural operation, commercial operation, light industrial, etc. All these issues sort of come back to human life and the well-being that's been impacted by those humans. Documented reasons over many years why silos and their operations, along with associated storage and processing, need to be widely respected because of these potential impact on people, their lives and health. From noise from all parts of the operation, smells, at times quite asphyxiating, the collapse, structural failure, falling over, dust from grains, poisonous fumigants used to control weevils, etc., spontaneous combustion leading to explosion and or fires, increased in bird, rodent and snake activity. There has not been any notification to residents on hazards or actions to be taken if there is an incident. The rules, policies and guidelines recommended are no silo to be erected within 100 metres of a dwelling, are for very good human safety reasons. There are at least 12 occupied houses within 100 metres of the silos and operations. Height limits for silo applications to the size of block operation is 7 metres, under 40 hectares. This is a backyard block and it's 15.5 metres high for the silo Orgo conveyor systems. Site safety recommendations and considerations have them away from power lines. We have 20 to 25 metres from the silos, away from tall trees, several trees 19 to 21 metres high, 9 to 15 metres away. Houses where children might play, 12 children 14 years to 4 months within 55 metres of the silos and right next door to the processing building. Other than the babies, all these kids are very active outdoors and all their mates come over quite often because of that activity. There's also some contradictions about where this DA is for, whether it's for number 9 on the original DA's letter sent out, or whether it's from 9 to 5, whether it's from 5 to 7, or from 5 to 9. The acoustics works, the statement of environmental effects, and all that have different scenarios of where this actual DA is for. Nice signs have been erected of any endangerment for chemical use. All the chemical fumigants should be signed, should be stored, yet they state that there is going to be no chemicals stored on site. So I'm not sure how they're going to control the weevils and all that sort of thing as well. Sure, over here, sorry folks, I'm quite intimidated by this. Already the operating hours are way outside what they state and the contradictions that my daughter talked about for the operating hours. They're not environmental effects. It's item 10 with only 4 silos to be housed on 5 to 7 Drew Street. There are only 3 silos there at the moment with their infrastructure, so when and where would the other one be built and placed? Will it be more interfering with our lives? And there's also mentioned there's $460,000 already been spent and another $500,000 to be spent potentially. On what and where and when is this money to be spent? And will it be part of the current DA extensions, or will they just then go ahead and build what they want, basically? So that's about all I've got to say. Thanks, folks. Cheers.
Thanks, Trevor. Okay, Bernard Shortis, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Bernard Shortis, Group 1 Feeds. I'd just like to explain to you all the history and everything of what we do. I'm actually from Uralla. Grown up in Armidale and Uralla all my life. My parents owned a place next door to the satellite station now. Dad had the Shortis Pharmacy, the Armidale Pharmacy, so I'm no newcomer to Armidale. We've been operating for 5 years. We had grains, feeds made down in Victoria, and we have expanded. We actually sell a lot of this feed overseas. It's probably go to the best horses in the world. It goes to Hong Kong, Singapore, Macau. It actually had protections in the Melbourne Cup, slippers, golden slippers, and it had horses race on the weekend. So chemicals, we don't use them because we can't. Rodents, we don't have because you can't have any rodents in that shed. That shed is rodent free. Dust, can't have dust in horse feed because they choke and it causes a lot of trouble. Yes, I was probably a little bit premature putting the silos up and I apologise. But I'm sure we can all work through this. It's not about the noise because the noise in that shed isn't there. It's about how we operate it. So the main noise we have is the forklift. Unfortunately, the forklift has this awful noise when you reverse, and that is ONHS, and we cannot take that off. And I'm sorry if that annoys everyone, but that is right along the whole street. It's got to work that way. The silos have never been turned on, so there's no noise comes out of that. They're dust free. When the truck drops the grains in there, they're covered, they go straight through into another process, and by the end of the process is finished, there's a bag of feed with moisture, oils and all things. The smell, which people are talking about, would be vanilla and molasses. They're the only things we put in there. We have a banana flavour, which help horses' guts. It's all organic. The noise, we've had a acoustic engineer from Brisbane come down. He actually has put a case forward. He has actually tried to get in touch with the sound bloke or the acoustic engineer at Armidale Council, but hasn't been able to get hold of him, and he has sent a letter through. We actually have brought a lot of business into town. We have about 25 companies which support us. If it's not the produce shops, motels, hotels, the electrician, the plumber, and all the other transport companies, which all support us and are happy to write a letter to support this game. We are trying to cooperate with everyone, and I would like to sit down with people and chat and sort all these problems out we have, because I believe that it's not a problem that we can deal with and we can sort it. We believe in time we can produce people and have jobs. The silos actually will be a lot better to use because you won't have rodent problems. There'll be no grains kept inside. We actually make the feed, the pellets, and all those different products. We have a truck, try and leave there 3 times a week. We have a warehouse in Coffs Harbour and a warehouse in Newcastle, which goes there and they distribute all over the place. We also have a place in Brisbane where we send all our feed overseas. Currently, it comes out of Melbourne and we have backed off in Armidale. Yes, we did do the wrong thing with the hours, but we have spoken to John Goodall and we have gone into those hours, which are from 6:30 to 5:30 at night. We have fixed the truck situation. It is hard when a truck pulls up, and you saw those photos, and he pulls up and says, we're right to unload here. You think, oh, that's okay, because he does it all downtown. And we have got photos where he's done it down the city and up at the other streets in Miller Street. So, you know, we didn't know any better. We have cut that off, and we have got rid of the B doubles. We actually unload the feed out at a place at Kingstown and bring it in by bulker bag. So we have tried to cooperate with everyone, as I have spoken to John Goodall about it. And we also are in contract with talking to Backtrack Boys to see if they can come along and learn and how things to do, learn how to drive forklifts and mix feed. And that's about all we've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Tom Payne, please.
Thank you, members. I'll also be speaking on behalf of Group 1 Feeds in relation to 9 Drew Street. I think where I'll start off is just addressing these issues where a lot of these complaints are coming from. Firstly, in particular, I'll talk about the silos. They haven't actually been in use yet. They're pending being used until this development application is considered by council. At the moment, they're not doing anything at all. Now, there was a complaint about using silos within the limit. Well, I think that falls under the state environment planning policy, so that's, I don't think, for any complainee's interpretation to be judging on. Armidale's already set the precedent with grain storage and silo usage with a number of different businesses around town, and if the argument's going to be made about being within 100 metres of any dwelling, well, that's already shot, because there's various businesses around town that use silos not only for grain storage but for actually mixing chemical. Now, just across the road there's a number of examples that use big silos to mix chemicals, concrete, etc. The next issue I was going to speak about is the parking. Now, obviously the pictures, yes, we've been speaking to council about the parking and working a way around this issue, because obviously at the moment we can't have trucks reversing into the property. We've submitted plans from regional architects which will still on an interim basis, which we're working to address this issue. I believe there has to be a way whether it will be allowed to reverse trucks in there or trucks being pulled up on the street. That's an issue we're still dealing with. Again, this precedent's been set around town, numerous venues. This shed has actually been operating for about 10 or 15 years, with places such as Silcar and Kmart reversing massive semi-trailers in and out of that shed for years, countless years. I've seen it personally for the last 15 years. So these are all issues which we have been working actively with council to address. As for the acoustic engineer report, that's been submitted to council. The sound at the moment, well, there can't be any sound from the silos because they haven't been in use at all. And I'd like to draw council's attention to the numerous complaints or submissions. I'll withdraw that. The submissions put in from worried neighbours, and they all draw a striking resemblance with all the same points about noise, loading, smell, fire concerns, rodents and snakes. They're nearly identical, and they don't come with any evidence to support the submissions. So I'd ask council to carefully consider these submissions when considering this DA. Moving forward, we need to look carefully at what this development application is. It is purely for the grain silos at 9 Drew Street and the auger machinery, not enforcing anything else under 5 Drew Street. There's been complaints put in saying that Group 1 feeds have actually been operating without a DA. Well, that's just not true. They've been rightfully using the shed for a considerable amount of time. We've been actively, again, working with council to make sure we're within our rights. I think the last legislation we're operating off is a deed from 1978, and we've had to adjust the hours and operations of business to fit in with that previous use. So I would reject that they've been operating without a DA or unlawfully been using the premises. As Bernie already mentioned, the operating hours, we've been adhering, Group 1 feeds have been adhering to that. And if the biggest issues are going to be noise, well, again, there's been no evidence put forward apart from our own acoustic engineer report to address these issues. That's all I have to address. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, Tom, before you go. Councillor Robinson.
One question was, and it's maybe something that Ambrose can talk about, just whether, the issue about whether there's been any operation without a DAE. And also, you can confirm your operating hours are 9:30 to 5:30, Monday to Saturday. And my other question was, how much would it cost you if you were looking for another site, and what possibilities are there to investigate those options?
So the first question was it in relation to the operating hours? So the operating hours, we've actually been working back towards the last consent given, which was in 1978. Now that allows operating hours between 6:30 and 8 p.m. However, as Mr. Short has advised, it's actually 6:30 to 5:30, and they've actually stopped a lot of the business of a weekend because that last consent in 1978 stipulated that you can't be operating over a weekend. So fine, they've restricted their trade a lot, actively trying to work, towards not working against the consent. Now, the other question was in relation to, what was the other question?
Have you actually looked for another site, or are there any other possibilities?
Well, I'm not sure what Mr. Shorters have been looking into, but the money spent already would make it extremely difficult and would pose a burden on the company and his business. So I think that's out of the option.
Councillor Connor.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like a little bit of clarification on 2 points, Mr. Payne. One is the apparent discrepancy between your acoustic, the hours set out in the acoustic report, which are 9 o'clock to 5:30, and your statement now that you want to operate from 6:30 to 5:30. Can you explain that? And I have one other point when that's done. Thank you.
Probably discrepancy there, which might be there, is probably the operation of any of the machinery which this development application is about. I believe when the acoustic engineer did the report, off the top of my head, it's been some time, you have to bear with me, but I believe that was when the machinery would be operating and not the business itself, so i.e. the silos and the possible auger from the silo. Well, it'll be operating between those hours and not from 6:30 in the morning. I do note the consent and the operation of business hours are different to the acoustic report, but we definitely clarify that in a further submission to the council. But my understanding is the acoustic report is mainly on the sound, not only from inside, but what the development application is about is the silos and the augers. So the acoustic report was for that and not actually the operation of the business at 5 Drew Street. It does cross paths.
So you'd be comfortable with a noise limitation between operating the noisy equipment between 9 and 5:30? The other question I have is, there seems to be, from Mr. Shortis's presentation, some desire to continue to work with council and the residential objectors, and so I'm sort of concerned as to why the matter's come to us now in the form it has, if you're still trying to, negotiate, a middle path that will allow abatement of noise and other alleged concerns for the residents with your need to or wish to continue to operate.
It'll be my respectful submission that we've submitted what's necessary for the development application by way of the acoustic engineer's report to address the issues raised by council. The parking, again, yes, we believe we've submitted everything now, and yet obviously there's a number of submissions to work against from the general public, but we believe we're in the position to move forward with the development application. We've answered all necessary questions.
Perhaps the planning staff could comment on that proposal that Councillor Connor has put forward.
Councillor Robinson, we'll wait until the actual motion comes before us. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
The last speaker is Michael Porter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors, for allowing me today to speak on behalf of Armidale Sports Council and a number of sporting bodies within the City of Armidale. I speak today to support item 17.3 as part of the minutes of the Armidale Sports Council held on the 10th of September. The items relate to drought issues and the watering of playing fields, parks and gardens in our council area. Sports Council is a 355 committee of council and as such reports to council on issues relating to sport and recreation in our council area. The mission statement for the Sports Council is to maintain, improve and promote sporting and active recreational facilities and events in the Armidale Regional Council. And that should be kept in the back of your mind as I speak. Since the construction of Malpas Dam in the late 60s, Armidale has been totally reliant on treated water from the Armidale Water Treatment Plant for the irrigation of its high-quality playing fields and parks and gardens. This, on many occasions, has given the people of Armidale an opportunity to complain about the use of potable drinking water for the irrigation of playing fields and gardens. This has come more to the fore given the current drought and the effect on all the ratepayers in the council. The council has adopted to water such assets as roundabouts, etc., with alternative water supplies, such as product from the Arboretum Spring-fed Dam, and again complaints. For the past 50 years, there have been very few issues with the ability of council to supply the city with water for all uses, including households and irrigation from the Malpas Dam. This has been an unprecedented drought in our area, and this has brought to the fore the shortcomings of Armidale's supply, especially for the supply of water for secondary uses such as the water of playing fields, parks and gardens. Over the past 10 years, Armidale Sports Council has worked with council to improve playing fields with updated irrigation systems, new and improved playing surfaces which need water. All playing fields in the Armidale area now are under an irrigated status. This has given sporting bodies and the general public improved playing surfaces and facilities, and as such the opportunity to attract sporting events to the city. An example of this is the Armidale Cricket Association, who have worked in the off-season to attract carnivals to Armidale's facilities and did so with 4 carnivals booked in. So far 2 of these have been lost due to the uncertainty of water in our playing fields and turf wickets. A loss to the business community and cricket of Armidale of over $400,000. It is time to move forward and move away from potable drinking water for the irrigation of such facilities and move to groundwater. Many other councils over the years in the northern area have done such in the playing fields including Tamworth, Gunnedah and Narrabri. Already this summer, a number of sports are being affected by councils' inability to irrigate playing fields in this very dry time. We have also been informed that if the dry continues and the fields are not watered and the possibility of a loss of grass over especially on Harris Park and Rollergast in these fields may well be closed due to the contamination on the issues on the site from the old gasworks. Surely if this is an issue, and it is, then it should be a priority that these 2 fields are watered to maintain the grass with groundwater which needs to be urgently sourced. Sourcing of groundwater for the majority of the playing fields would save council money, save council a significant amount of potable water for the community. Over 75,000 kilolitres were used in 2018 to water the fields. Save council money, as last year in 2018, to spend in excess of $200,000 to purchase water from the water fund for the irrigation of fields. Would lessen the problems caused by the loss of playing fields for the sporting bodies. An example is cricket this season has lost its 5 major fields through no water for wicket preparation. These are Bellevue Oval, Lambert Park, Harris Park, Rollergast and Sports Ground. From my investigation and talking to boring contractors, irrigation specialists, the cost, depending on depth of water, would be less than $20,000 per bore. I'm hearing lots of other figures bandied around in the vicinity of $100,000 per bore, and I'm not sure where those sort of figures would come from. Also, if this work was done as soon as possible, there would be a considerable saving and reinstatement costs for the grounds and especially the planted area ovals of Rollergast Sports Ground and Newling. A cost to be probably around between $20,000 and $30,000 per field to reinstate them to their current status at the end of the drought. Also as well, the income from player levies would remain and this would avoid an income loss for the Armidale Sports Council. So in closing, I recommend to Council the minutes from Sports Council dated the 10th of September 19 with 3 recommendations to move forward with.
Thanks, Mike. Hang on, Mike. Councillor O'Connor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Porter. My question is whether you considered using treated water, recycled water. Have you looked into that?
In my time at council, a long time ago, and it's quite expensive, and the figure I've heard bandied around to do that would be in excess of $4 million. It's always an option, but that effluent water now is currently used on the farm, which is quite a reasonable income source to council as well. So you have to weigh that up. But there should be no issue with finding groundwater in the centre of Armidale along the creeklands. Armidale, prior to having treated water from a water treatment plant, was basically serviced by wells in the centre of town. So the groundwater's there. I know I had a well in my backyard when I was growing up, and every other house in the street did as well. It can't be hard to find.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I understand there actually is a project being done by Armidale Historical Society, relocating and identifying all the old wells. Are you in touch with those people? Yeah, I think, anyway, it is Armidale Historical Society.
Working in the Armidale area at this point in time, and I live at Kelly's Plains, and they're finding water there at 30 metres, and good water. And their cost to put a bore down, plus the pump on top, there's $5,500 for the bore, and the pump would be between $2,500 and $5,000, depending on the depths and what other assets there, like power and things. So I'm not sure where 100,000 comes from, but anyhow, that's something that's been thrown around.
Thanks, Mike. Councillors, you've had moving on to item 6, confirmation of minutes. You've had the ordinary council meeting and the extraordinary council meeting. So could I have a move and a seconder? Councillor Gray, Councillor Withers, any comments, corrections? Okay, I'll put that. Those in favour? Carried. There's no mayoral minutes, so we move straight on to item 8.
Mr. Mayor, can I move a motion that the item with regards to the development on Drew Street be moved forward so that people don't have to wait till later in the agenda? So I'll move that it becomes the next agenda item.
So is there a seconder?
Yeah,
Councillor Robertson. Those in favour? Carried. Okay.
Can I move one as well, just to push so our other speaker doesn't have to wait around, that the minutes for the Sports Council get pushed in after that one,
Yes,
please?
a seconder? Councillor Gray. Those in favour? Carried. Okay, that'll come after item 8 in total. So we'll do rescission motion 8.1. Move, Councillor Gray. Second, Councillor Murat. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor. Now, this is regarding the allocation of the continued expenditure with the Rockvale Road. Look, I understand that the want to have funds to continue with Rockvale Road. Unfortunately, we are in a dire situation with the water, and which is contributing to this project not being completed. And it is a great inhibitor of completing this project within budget and within time. So therefore, these funds will be lost if the project isn't completed. So it makes common sense to have them redirected. And the Guyra Main Street upgrade is a very worthwhile project to reallocate these funds to. There's many people who use the Rockvale Road who frequent Guyra, so that they will still benefit, not directly on the road, but in other ways. The Guyra community has a great need to attract economic development opportunities. This upgrade will assist, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Mayor, through the CEO, that this money would mean that another block of the Guyra Main Street upgrade could be completed, and that is a significant benefit to the Guyra community and the Guyra economic status. The Guyra community all need to know as well that they are not forgotten. They are an integral part of our region. They are a community that deserves our input. They deserve a facility, an area that not only becomes attractive to economic development, but also attractive to a community space that reflects the community spirit, such as what they've already got with the Trout Festival, the Christmas Street Party, and all of those that have been there have thoroughly enjoyed themselves over the past couple of years, and of course our Lamb and Potato Festival that's here. The upgrade, the extra upgrade will also be make our Guyra CBD area more attractive to our tourists with the RVs, and has a huge potential to encourage them to stay longer. We need to be realistic and use common sense in this situation. And it is unfortunate that the underground fuel tanks did take up a considerable amount of the money allocated to the Guyra Street upgrade, Main Street upgrade. And it would have been beneficial if, in hindsight, it's a wonderful thing that if these were if this problem was forecast in the original budgeting and upgrade planning. It wasn't. Let's move on. We can't turn back the clock, but we can use our common sense now and make a difference to a community that is struggling with the drought, just like everybody else, and bring some sensibility into allocating these funds from the Rockvale Road, where a small amount can go a long way in this community.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Miro. Mr Mayor, while I could happily support either project, the questions I asked the CEO at the last meeting indicated that further works on the Rockvale Road aren't shovel ready. The possibility of designing, scoping and tendering that project out, or council staff undertaking that work before the end of the financial year is pretty limited, may not happen. There's also the issues with water, which is getting worse. So in order to guarantee that money will be spent by the end of the financial year, I can only recommend that council reassess this matter and redirect that funds to Guyra, which is shovel ready. The work's being done out here at the moment. The crews are already on site, and that funding, as Councillor Gray said, will allow them to do a fair bit more work, which will compensate for the loss of funding from the fuel tank issue. Thank you, Councillor Murat. Speaker against the motion? Okay, I'll put that. Those in favour? Those against? Do you want your votes recorded? How do you get that? And Councillor Tali. Oh, sorry. You did. Councillor. Item 8.2.
12.4, the decision on the silos and elevators in Drew Street be brought forward to the next item.
And I said I'd do it after 8.
Oh, okay.
Because we'd already started on 8.
Point of order, Mr Chair. A motion was put to that effect and we agreed to that motion. You can't unilaterally say, no, we'll deal with this first. That's the resolution of this council.
Councillor Tyler, I did say call for item 8 when that notice of motion was put, so I'm sticking to item 8. It's only going to take this part 8.2. So, a mover for 8.2, Councillor Gray. Councillor Witters, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Dr Mayor. As I was not well at the previous meeting, this agenda item did come up, and there were a couple of things that I believed that needed to be addressed. But I would actually like to put forward an amendment to this Part C of the rescission, and that is that instead of the nominations be called for a chairperson, a second councillor representative of the Regional Growth, Place Activation Advisory Committee from Council, that instead of that, that Councillor Murat be placed as chair of the committee, and that Councillor Bailey and Councillor Gray remain the second and third councillors of the Regional Growth and Place Activation Advisory Committee. Are you? The second and third councillors of the Regional Growth and Place Activation Advisory Committee. Okay, so does that need to be, that amendment be
Yes, to
okay
speak.
for second,
Just-
for our seconder?
Yes, as
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Withers, are you happy with that?
So firstly, the purpose of joining these committees was to develop a pilot committee, an opportunity to bring a distinct new structure to to benefit the economic outcomes for the communities within the Armidale Regional Council area. Now, point C, after much consideration, I've put forward because I believe that our fellow councillor Murat is a strong believer and has a strong passion with much experience in the area of economic development, and will only be a benefit to this committee should he take on that he steps up as chair. I also believe that Councillor Bailey and myself can still participate in a strong manner and be a strong support to Councillor Murat. In speaking to item E, with a maximum of 6 external members, again, this is a pilot structure for the committees. It's focusing on building the 4 pillars of environment and infrastructure, growth, prosperity and economic development, leadership and people and community. So these 4 pillars can be constructively represented by having a maximum of 6, and it also allows room for other membership that is skilled and represents those 4 pillars. And that's hence brings into item F around representatives from the Armidale-Guyra Business Alliance, that we're bringing together people that can bring forth recommendations and information to council as the strategic decision makers of the Armidale Regional Council. I also believe that with having this structure of using focus groups, we can also bring in far greater quality input from the community through to the advisory committee, and therefore the ultimate result is that there is high quality outcomes for the Armidale regional community.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Withers? Okay. You got a question, Councillor Bailey?
Can I speak to the motion?
Not yet, because a seconder has a...
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what Councillor Gray has already said. Leave it at that.
A speaker against the motion? Councillor Tarley?
Mr Mayor, I have a concern dealing with all 3 as a job lot. Would you agree that we could perhaps deal with them individually? I can support some, but not all of them.
Councillor Tarley, we agree. We did all 5 or 6 when we did the original motion last council meeting, so I see no reason why we don't deal with all.
All right, okay, I'll speak against. I mean,
Can I second the procedural motion that we deal with them in seriatim?
There was no.
I took advice from the Mayor that it couldn't happen, so I'm not moving a motion. I'm prepared to speak against. Not against the first part. I wholeheartedly support the appointment of Councillor Murat as the chairperson. I think that's a good move. I have some concerns that the maximum number of people would be 6. The committee that I appointed had 15, which might be at the other end of the spectrum. I acknowledge that. But my main concern, which I spoke about at last council meeting, which Councillor Gray didn't attend, was that if we encourage Armidale-Guyra Business Alliance to apply, that's very different from what we said last meeting, that they should have some, that could mean only one, some representation on that committee to reflect the fact that we've had a working memorandum of understanding with that group for well on 3 years. To just virtually throw them out in a sense, unless there's someone who's put in a really smick application, I think we're thumbing our nose at the business chambers, and I can't support that. Thank you.
Speaker 4, Councillor Bailey.
Mr Mayor, as chair of the outgoing Likely Regional Growth Committee, I'm very proud of what we have achieved. Our committee achieved extraordinary things. We changed the name of an industrial area. We put new signage at the entrance to Armidale. We undertook a number of events in Sydney to promote the virtues of Armidale. Our committee has achieved great things. However, when you bring two strong chairs together, it's probably a great opportunity to bring somebody in who can offer new insight and new light. And I've worked with Councillor Murat, and I think he'll be, and I had decided not to apply for the position, so I'm quite happy to support Councillor Murat, and I think he'll do an outstanding job as chair, and I look forward to working with him.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor O'Connor, you wish to speak against?
Yes, and I would like to foreshadow, or actually propose a one-word substitution by way of amendment in relation to the proposed new paragraph E, and that is that the word maximum be changed to minimum.
Councillor Gray? No.
Well, I'll speak to it if there's a seconder. The reason that I have proposed this amendment is for the reasons that Councillor Tiley has set out. It's really quite, I think, appropriate that there be a position there for at least one AGBA representative. I mean, that represents a working coalition of the two business chambers for both Armidale and Guyra. And I think to limit the number to 6 external members limits the skill base. So if you have the word minimum there, then you allow for AGBA to have perhaps a 7th external and 6 excellent and compliant and skilled people to come on board to assist the committee. That's the reason for my proposed amendment.
Councillor Robinson. Councillor O'Connor, your mic.
Oh. Well, at the last meeting, we did say that there were going to be a minimum of 6 external members. And I think that was something that was agreed by the whole council, and I have no reason to suggest that we should really rescind that motion at the time. And also, I think we should be looking for the widest possible experience. And until we see who applies for that committee, if there were 7 external members who were eminently qualified, and we really wanted all 7 of them, it seems very silly at this stage to limit ourselves to a maximum of 6. So we're just jumping the gun, and let's really decide this once we've had the applications in, so that we know what the expertise is and who is represented. And then if we don't get 7 or even 6 wonderful committee members, then we can just have 6. I mean, just have the minimum. It's really a question of maximum or minimum. We don't really need to decide that at the time until we see how qualified and how enthusiastic the membership is, because I'd hate to discourage people from applying or hate to turn away excellent qualified people who could give us very good advice.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Anyone wish to speak against the amendment? If there's no one against, I'll put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment, the amendment is the change the word maximum to minimum. So the amendment.
So, do I have a right to reply on that?
There's no one spoke against. I've asked if anyone was to speak against, and no one did. So I'm putting the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment. There's been no one spoke against the amendment, Councillor Tiley. So I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? 4, 5. And I'll use the casting vote, and I'll vote it down. So go back to maximum of 6. So I'll put the vote, the whole motion then. Sorry, we've had a speak again. So, Councillor Gray, you have a right to reply.
Thank you. You're looking forward to this, Councillor Tiley. First of all, I would like to address the membership of the Armidale-Guyra Business Alliance. I'm actually a bit disappointed that people believe that there's the potential that there wouldn't be representation on this committee. There is highly experienced people on this committee, in the alliance. They have ample strengths in skills and experience to bring to this committee. What we're making sure of is that they are considered as part of those external members rather than them being not have any chance, which is never the intention. We need their representation, and yet it is up to that alliance to put forward their best representatives. And it doesn't say that it has to be 1, it could be 2, or whatever it could, but it's up to that alliance to decide who can best represent them on this committee based on skills and their, of course, their expression of interest application. Now, I just feel that there needs to be some further explanation around the structure of the committee to get the full benefit of whether a structure like this will work as a pilot. Then we do need to give it a go. And having a maximum of 6 as the core committee, knowing that under that there's focus groups or subcommittees that can run cohesively and in alignment with different projects running simultaneously, there is the opportunity to have so much more input. If there is the opportunity to have up to or a minimum of 6 on some of these subcommittees, that makes so much more common sense to have that community input than to limit it just to 16 to 15 people on a core committee. The quality of the input from the community now goes so far beyond what we've had the opportunity to provide. The opportunity that we've had so far has been very good, and I absolutely back that what Councillor Bailey has said around the people that have supported both committees. They have done an exceptional job. I totally believe that we as a council, we as a committee structure are ready to try something new, give something else a go, knowing that this will bring far greater community input into the economic development of this whole region. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gray. I'll put that to the vote. Those are the people in favour of the vote, the motion. Motion's carried.
Could we be told the vote, please?
Yes, there was 6.
6. Okay, I only saw 5.
So, councillors, hand up again, please. Councillor Tyler, are you happy with the 6?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, moving on to item 12.4, please. That's on page... That's on page 26, councillors. Or on your iPad, 26 flicks or something. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Witters. Seconder. Councillor Martin. Councillor Witters.
Alrighty. Just quickly thank those from the community that have spoken on this issue. Appreciate your thoughts. This is one that I had to read through Council's recommendations and the attachments 2 to 3 times. That's a fairly either way issue. I've written a few things that I had a little bit of concerns about that have been mentioned already. And I apologise if my reading of the attachments is not to the agreement of others. Maybe I've read it differently than what they have, but from what I read, a lot of the DA, what's written in the DA hasn't been followed, as being mentioned, like the B doubles, the timing, all that sort of stuff of when the business runs has not been followed, and questioning whether it is now only being followed because council's onto them, or if it was just something that they decided to change on their own. Not against the business. I think it's a really great business. It's great to see businesses like this in Armidale. Just whether this location is the right spot for it, but that's for this council to determine, I suppose. But my biggest concern is I think one of the speakers spoke about there's other businesses doing some of the stuff now, but we're not deciding on what them other businesses are doing. We don't have the information or the knowledge of what conditions they've been set or what zoning land that they're on, so whether their business actually is appropriate for the land that they're zoned in, which is, I think, is one of the contentious issues around this business, whether it's what the business is doing, whether it's actually in the right land zoning. So we can't really compare that, apples to oranges, so to speak. But also, if we allow this DA through, in my opinion only, it sets a dangerous precedent that other businesses can just start doing what they want without council's approval, and that sets us down a slippery slope.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to all the people that have spoken today on this issue. I understand it's highly contentious. I myself have been in a bit of dilemma over it because I kept awake last night going over it all in my head. It's obviously a great business, but unfortunately it's just located in the wrong place. And I just feel that we can't ignore the compliance issues, as this site does not minimise any adverse effects on other land users, including the nearby residences. The possibility of issues such as dust, noise, increased vermin aside, which may impact on the other residents, we have other issues. The concrete slab under the silos had no council approval. The use commenced on site without operating approval in October 2018, advised by our town plougher. The hours of use are conflicting and don't seem to fit in any report. And as the business does not comply with a number of provisions of the Armidale Generic Control Plan 2012, I feel that granting consent would set an undesirable precedent.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Your microphone. Thank you. A speaker against, Councillor Robertson.
Well, I don't want to speak against it. The first thing what I did ask when the speakers were there was that we have some comments from the planning staff about whether there can be any negotiated settlement, and I'd really like to hear their views on that.
I might.
And also the compliance issues, that whether they always have or have not been operated.
I'll pass this through. CEO, can you ask the planning officer to come forward, please?
Can I please add whether this is for the dual shed as well as the silos? It appears because one of the speakers spoke on it. Is it for just the silos and the what's the name? Was it for the whole operation? Can we have that cleared up too, please?
Councillor Gritley, thanks.
Councillors, if I could ask the Manager of Development to cover the issues. Largely the issues are covered in the planner's report. However, if he could just give the highlights and specifically address those questions that have been asked.
I'll attempt to answer those questions if I can remember all of them. So I'll probably work backwards with yours first, Councillor Gallatley. The land use that's actually operating there now is operating under an old consent, as the speakers talked about, from 1978, and that was for an engineering works. So there's conditions on that consent that allow it to operate, but they have to comply with that consent. There's some debate as to whether it is actually an engineering works, being horse feed. And if we go back to 1978, that actually predates the current planning legislation, so it was actually done under the old IDOs, so it's, you know, it's a little bit of a long stretch to use that consent. The consent that's been lodged, or the application that's been lodged, includes the use of the land and also the erection of the buildings. So because the planning legislation changed in 98, they combined both planning and building together, so you can't separate those. So the silos are actually development under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act and required consent before they were being installed. One of the speakers spoke about distances from silos, from residences, etc. And that is, as they stated, correct. That is in the state environmental planning policy for exempt and complying. If you comply with those provisions, you can install the silo without consent from council, but that does not mean that you have to comply with those setbacks when you lodge a development application. So I think I've answered most. I think there might have been one more from Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, that was in relation to whether there was any hope of getting, I mean, the applicants expressed a great desire to get together and try and work this out. Do you think there's any hope of working it out so that both parties could be satisfied?
I'll just turn that off. That's probably a hard question for me to answer because that relies on the objectors and the applicant coming to some agreement about the operations. This has been an interesting exercise because most times when planners are assessing applications, the use has not started. So when we're putting reports up and doing assessments, we are basing that assessment on what we think might be the outcome and putting conditions on consents to alleviate any concerns that we perceive will potentially arise from that development or land use occurring. In this instance, there has been operations, albeit under that 1978 consent, and that is having a impact effectively on the adjoining owners, which you've heard from a couple today. So we have an advantage in this that we can see what is actually occurring with the operation of the business now. Whether the applicant could address those issues, I can't speak for them, unfortunately.
The silos, have they or have they not been operating?
I can't answer that. The applicant stated in his submission that they hadn't been operating, and so I have to believe that.
Councillor O'Connor, you had your light flashing first. So I'll go Councillor O'Connor and then Councillor Gray.
No, I think Councillor Robinson's question covered the question I was going to ask. And it is about trying to reach some settled, negotiated solution. So I guess I will take the opportunity now. I've got the red light to confirm with Mr. Horman you don't see any opportunity to work further on this with the applicants.
Just before you do, I might just ask the CEO to comment on that point.
Councillors, I think there's been extensive discussion and consideration by our planning and our planner on this matter. By the time we formulate a determination or recommendation to council, all of the objections have been considered. The applicant's response to those objections have been considered, and we felt it's important to bring it to a conclusion for determination by this council. So I think the answer is we've reached the full extent of what we can do.
I seek to speak against the motion when it's appropriate, Mr Mayor.
Councillor
I just have a question, and pardon me for my naivety. Very briefly, would you be able to clarify the difference between light industrial, medium and large or heavy?
I can. So we have two primary zones under our LEP in the Armidale LEP, which is IN1 and IN2. So the IN2 is a lighter industrial type series of land uses, whereas the IN1 is that more heavy type manufacturing. In terms of a permissibility issue, we're not really looking at a permissibility issue in this situation because the use or the proposed use is a compliant use in the IN2 zone. It's really not, it's not based around prohibition or permissibility, it's more around the operation and then the impact that is having in the area.
Councillor Murad, you had your... yes, I've got three questions. Can you clarify that the issue around loading and unloading of trucks hasn't been resolved? They're still using the street to some extent?
As the applicant has said, they're not using the street at present. They yesterday have submitted turning circles that show that a vehicle can reverse off the street and into the property and then unload wholly within the property. As the report says, Council's policy is that loading and unloading is undertaken and vehicles are leaving in a forward direction, entering and leaving in a forward direction. So in that sense, it would be difficult for this site to comply with that element.
I'm upset. The second one is there's been acoustic reports done, but the applicants have said that they were done on the silos and they've never had grain in them. So I'm asking the question, an acoustic report done on a silo with no grain in it compared to one with grain and grain actually moving through the system, to my simple mind might be that that'd be different. A silo or an auger under load would make a different noise than one rattling along with no grain in the system. So is that acoustic report in your mind valid, or it would, and since it was done with an empty silo, is it an invalid acoustic report?
It's the acoustics report that was submitted with the application or that we requested as additional information during the process. In terms of the output from that underload or not underload, I'm not entirely sure, and I'd refer back to the planning report because I don't want to get into a situation where I'm making an assessment here for you. That assessment, the planning assessment, is actually in the report.
And the third question is, and I have a vague memory of this coming up in another DA in a previous council, in previous time. The applicant's relying on a DA approval from 1978. I'm under the belief that if a DA is approved and then consequently down the track there are other uses for the building, then you can't go back and rely on an approval beforehand. And they've stated that the building was used by Silcar as a warehouse. It's been used by Kmart as a warehouse. So that break in the cycle, does that still allow them to rely on the approval that was done in 1978, or is that approval invalid?
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into planning law. Once a consent operates, it actually doesn't, it's never surrendered unless the applicant surrenders that consent. So a consent that's issued today or consent that was issued back in 1978, if that land use is commenced, it then operates and operates forever and a day on the land. So as the ownership changes, those consents run with that. There is the opportunity to have a multi-layered site that has many, many different land uses, and you can actually go back and pick up one of those consents from previous time. but you need to comply with that consent fully. And that's where it becomes, tricky at times, because the new use that's proposing to go in might look back at a previous consent and go, well, I'm kind of like that, but I don't fully comply with that. So you don't get the option to sort of buy a little bit from this one and a little bit from that one.
Councillor Gertley, you asked,
One of my questions is...
and if there's no other questions, Councillor Tyler, you got a question or?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr Ambrose. So, you wish to speak against?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors should be under no illusions that if we adopt this motion, we're effectively putting a good business out of business. New councillors may not be aware that between 97 and 98% of all DAs that come to councils, they're dealt with by staff under delegation. We, lucky councillors, we get to arbitrate on that other 2.5%, which are doubtful in terms of the legislation or where there's substantial objection. They're the two cases when they come to us. Councillor Widders acknowledged in his opening remarks that it was a fairly either way issue. There's a fair acknowledgement. It's not easy. We all acknowledge that. Councillor Widders also said that he wasn't against business. If we vote for this motion, you in effect, Mr Widders, Councillor Widders, are against this particular business at least. Councillor Widders didn't give any compelling reasons to refuse, and he waffled on about apples and oranges, and he said we'd be creating a dangerous precedent. I disagree with that last part because we consider, and we're obliged to consider on its merits, each individual DA that comes before us. I'm really disappointed that one councillor was losing sleep over that, but that tells me that she was obviously very concerned about it, and that's fine. This DA can be approved, subject to sound conditions which are contained in the attachments. This then legalises and allows the business to continue. I submit that there is not sufficient reason to put this long-established business out of business. And if this motion is defeated, I'll move the approval of the application. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
A speaker for? Righto.
Is there a second speaker against?
No, it has to be someone for. So, Councillor Widders, you have a right to reply.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone else for their comments. I'd like to thank Councillor Tiley for his especially. Maybe it's a generational thing that around, I don't think I was waffling on, just using different terminology. Having listened to Mr Hallman's comments and comments from the councillors, again, as I stated earlier, it's not one that's an easy decision. I just had a couple of other points here around this. As it stands around this application, although it is a good business, as I acknowledged earlier, that doesn't justify their non-compliance in a lot of areas, whether the business is good or bad. Everyone still has to follow the compliance issues around that. So I would support the motion as written, but encourage the applicants to work with the council to find common ground to continue the business within the region.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote then. The motion, the recommendations as is. So those in favour of the recommendations? 5. And those against? Councillor Robinson, I missed what you're voting for, so 6 for 5. Thank you. 6 to 4. 3, 4, that's 4. 6 to 4. So it is a division, so your hands up please, let's go back to start. Because of the division, please raise your hands in favour of the recommendations. Have we got Dorothy? Those against? 4. Have you got them, Hayley? Good, thank you.
Mr Mayor, before we move on to the next item, can I request that the CEO request that a senior officer of council work with the company to try and find a way that they can satisfactorily stay in Armidale, and we try and work with them so that they can find a site that is suitable.
Yep. So, moving on to item what is that one? 17.3. Can I have a move? Councillor Witters, a seconder? Sorry, seconder for Councillor Gray. Councillor Witters?
Yeah, just around the Sports Council minutes there as Speaker Michael Porter mentioned, there is some recommendations from the Sports Council. For those of you that have read it, what page is it on? Anyone? 42. Thank you, Adrian. Councillor O'Connor. So there's two there, maybe three. Just around the irrigation of the sports fields to keep them going, and the playing fields and everything else like that. I know it'll take some time to get it done, so it's not really going to solve our issues with the sporting fields at the moment. But for those of you who don't know, a lot of our summer sports will be affected because of the conditions of the grounds. Cricket, due to start in 2 weeks, touch football will play on Wicklow Field until it's no longer playable, and athletics are having to move their track around Harris Park to make sure they're not ripping up the grass enough for the contamination issues to come along, from my understanding. What this does, as the Speaker said, guarantees that those playing fields, if we can put some money into looking for some bores along the river and at other playing fields, it guarantees that those issues that he raised don't occur. So, and we're using less of the town water supply system in keeping the fields up to standard. And just around why I think this is important, I think sport is a good community wellbeing issue. It's especially in times like this, a lot of people need a relief and an outlet to get rid of their frustrations and their emotions, and sporting events are a good opportunity. It's the same reason why we're looking to open the pool for that. So I really think if this council is compelled to give the money and the time into looking for bores, I do know that there are bores along that. I know there's a bore at the Ex-Services Club, but whether there's significant pressure and significant water along there might be an issue. But the issue today is providing the money so that those works can begin, because it not only affects the summer sports this year, but if we don't get the grounds, keep them at a good standard, the winter sport for next year and then summer sports for the year after will be affected, and that then affects, as the Speaker said, like carnivals, tourism, money, jobs, all that sort of stuff within the thing. So there's more of the flow-on effect than just the sport.
Thanks, Councillor Witters. Councillor Gray.
Excuse
me. So, Connor, your mic, please.
One of the reasons I feel it's very important to speak for this motion is that sport is an integral part of our society, it's an integral part of our community. It is also, therefore, the social ability of people coming together, health impacts, etc. It's a very important part of our community. And being an avid fan of most sports, maybe not cricket, Councillor Witters, but I do understand that it's important to many people for their sanity, apparently, is that right? So, but in these tough times, we do need to make the effort to have a place for people where people can gather to play their sports, be social, stay healthy, and also invest in our young people. We need to make sure that these facilities are available for them, and that those sort of activities continue during our tough times as best we can. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, can I make a brief amendment with, or perhaps the mover might agree? I'm really concerned about Central Park in the context of water, and I can speak to that if I'm allowed to, but if we could add Central Park to sports, to enable sports and Central Park, the heritage listed park. No, look, the situation is that Central Park's now heritage listed. It's an 1880s Victorian era park where the water supply to it has been dramatically reduced naturally, and there's a real issue that the park trees of 1880 vintage and may well die from lack of water, and a truck and a tank and some watering in Central Park as well as sporting fields, I think it's a must do. So if you add that, I'd be very happy. No, it's not.
So I just asked the CEO to clarify some points on that. Thanks, Councillor Tiley.
Councillors, you may be unaware, but the staff have been working and looking at Central Park. We're looking at accessing the spring water from the Arboretum to water vital trees and indeed Central Park.
Just with our meeting around this, Richard Morsley, it's unfortunate Richard's not here, but he was at the meeting and explained that, and he has explained to, I think it might have been the meeting we had on Monday, that Central Park is being looked after, as the CEO said, with that. Well, the CEO's...
Thanks to Councillor Tiley. I think the CEO has explained it, and it's been explained again to the Sports Committee, so I think that area's been covered. So a speaker against? Councillor O'Connor, you're speaking against?
No, I want to speak for.
Is there a speaker against? If not, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Councillors, we move all the way back to 9.1, which is on page 7. Mover.
I'd like to move that. Thank you.
Councillor O'Connor. Seconder, Councillor Robertson. Councillor O'Connor.
Oh, look, this is pretty self-explanatory. We've been hearing since March this year about the competitive dialogue. The community's expressing, asking questions. It's going, the longer that we don't get an update, the more I think the anxiety builds in the town. So I'm just asking for an update report on the progress of the results of the competitive dialogue EOI.
Councillor Robinson, before you do, I might just ask the CEO to provide some update.
The EOI process has been protracted because it's a complex matter. We're unable to give any detailed, substantive update to councillors at the moment because we are still going through with the individual respondents to the EOI around commercially sensitive issues. We can certainly update on the process, but it is difficult to go through the substantive content of the respondents. I do want to highlight, as we've said repeatedly, there is no privatisation on the table of the airport, and that has not been the substance of either the expressions of interest nor the responses to it.
Thanks, CEO. Councillor Robinson.
Oh, thank you. The CEO's response is at least one issue that can actually set the community's minds at rest if she is now assuring us that there have not been any expressions of interest for actually buying the airport. I'm very, very pleased to hear that, and I'm sure many people in the community will also be pleased to hear that. And The only question that I would, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just ask when we can expect to see the report. I mean, obviously, the sooner the better, but certainly just knowing when we can expect it would be very useful, and maybe having a little bit more time than we normally have been given to look at these issues, because it is a very complicated issue. It is something we really do need to look at and discuss with the community. So perhaps just a little bit of an idea of the timeline would be very, very helpful to a lot of people. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Robertson. CEO?
As the councillor has noted, it is a very complex matter. There is as much work being undertaken internally to understand the full financials of the airport, the projected value in the future, and that's we have obviously briefed consultants to help us with that, and that will take some time, as well as then doing the analysis and assessment against the respondents to the expression of interest. If I can put councillors' minds at rest, there will be a full briefing to councillors once we have all of that data and information, as well as the benefit of the analysis that needs to be undertaken. Can I be very clear that when the matter comes to council, it will not be for the purposes of choosing a particular option. It will be for a course of action that may lead to an option. And so there are several stages before any definitive action is taken in respect of the airport.
The CEO, Councillor Robinson said you made it clear that the airport for sale was not an option. I don't remember hearing that statement.
If I can just clarify, the responses at this stage to the expressions of interest do not outline any particular option, whether it be for purchase or investment or anything else. At this stage, as we keep saying, it's about exploring potential options and what might be out there in the marketplace. And it won't be until we've done the full analysis of what the potential might be against against the advice we receive about the airport itself, if we were to continue as we are at the moment, that we can then provide that information to council to determine whether it wishes to pursue any course of action.
Thank you. We've had two speaker against the motion. Councillor Gray.
Well, with the intention of finding out information, I'm not necessarily against this motion. I think what perturbs me about, yet again, the request for an update as a matter of urgency is because I feel, and I'm happy to be wrong here, that there is a lack of understanding around what the actual commercial conversation of an expression of interest actually contains and what the process is. I do agree that any commercial expression of interest does need to be very wide offering as far as what opportunities could be presented to us when action is ready to be taken. What I mean by that is that if council went out for an expression of interest of just two options to say we only want to know who's interested in buying our airport, or we only want to know who's interested in managing our airport, we get a very limited feedback in the expression of interest process. I feel that there is a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding that then is spread out towards in a spider web fashion out into the community that has led to some community misunderstanding around the process of engaging a commercial expression of interest. So for that reason alone, I am not for this motion.
Is Councillor Gray a speaker for the motion? So Councillor O'Connor, your right to reply.
Oh, look, I actually think Councillor Gray might have been speaking for the motion. In reality, look, it's a pretty simple request. We are the governing body. We're not prescribing what the report contain. All we want is an update on where we are now. I don't think that's too big a ask for the governing body. To be honest, I will admit that I don't really understand the nature of what would be happening in relation to a competitive dialogue. I'm assuming, I don't even know if there's an undertaking that from the CEO in what she said as to whether the activity to date is restricted to a competitive dialogue, because certainly the published document that went to the national newspapers does talk about a process to sale. So I just think it's a pretty simple request, and I commend my fellow councillors to support it.
Thanks, Councillor. Connor, your microphone, please. Okay, I put that to the vote. Those in favour of the motion? 4, 5. Those against? The motion's lost. Councillor Bailey, can you take over?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I need to protect you from yourself. By your announcement that Councillor Bailey would chair this segment, you're in contravention of section 6.2 of our Code of Meeting Practice, which says that when the Mayor and Deputy Mayor are absent, those councillors remaining will elect the chair. Now, to protect you, you should leave right now, and so should the Deputy Mayor, because you've declared conflicts of interest, and the CEO should conduct an election of somebody to fill the role of chair of this particular segment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler.
Otherwise, it could look that you're, orchestrating something and you've got a conflict of interest. Okay. Nominate Councillor Bailey.
Councillors, I was just awaiting the departure of the interest. And I now call for nominations for the chair.
Nominate Councillor Bailey.
Councillor Bailey, any other nominations? No, if there's no other nominations, I think we can declare Councillor Bailey the chair in respect of item number 9.2.
Could I have a mover for item 9.2?
I am the mover. Thank
Councillor O'Connor?
Yes.
Can I have a second for the motion, please? Councillor Robinson. Councillor O'Connor, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do, but before I have an additional paragraph C to add, which would read as follows, little c bracket, that in relation to paragraphs A and B, how are we up to? Eligibility may be conditioned on appropriate and reasonable hardship criteria.
Is the seconder happy to accept that amendment?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Councillor Bailey. Look, I had the privilege, as did the Mayor and our CEO, to attend the briefing session out at EBOR I think 2 Fridays ago, in relation to the impact of the Bees Nest Guy Fawkes National Park fire, which has really had a very, very destructive effect on many of our rural ratepayers' livelihoods. The figures that I spoke in depth to several of the families that have been affected, some 100% loss of their infrastructure, others, sorry, did I say 70? I meant 100%, 70%, 85%. There's substantial loss of stock, as well as, of particular concern is boundary fencing and also internal fencing. The fires just ripped through and destroyed everything. Some people have saved their houses as a result of assistance from, contacts in town, and others have, strangely had a loading ramp survive, but no yard attached to the loading ramp. So if you're a preparing producer, you're not going to get your cattle onto a loading ramp without a yard. But these people are in absolutely dire distress, and there were tears flowing at that meeting. So hence, I think that we need, as a council, to acknowledge that there's substantial suffering in our community as a result of those fires. I think it's well known that there's substantial suffering and mental health impacts as well from this ongoing drought. So it's pretty hard to pick the biggest loser, if you like, in the current situation where we're within drought and fire. In relation to, where am I up to? Excuse me. In relation to drought, I've just heard this afternoon at a special talk that 57% of the kill that's now going through abattoirs is female stock. So and we're looking forward to a huge lack of capacity for breeding. And I think we're also, we stated we're 8 to 10 inches behind our worst ever dry time. So we are in new territory. So I put this forward because one of the biggest messages that came across to me at Airball was that people need to get their fences back up, their infrastructure back up. And as a result of the millennial drought, the dry times between, that was 2002, between now and then, very few good years. People have run out of their capital backup. They've spent all their money. The offer of additional debt from the state and federal government, or from the federal government in particular, as a form of drought assistance is just almost like an insult now, because there isn't any more capacity to take on debt for a lot of these people. The Blaze Aid people were there, but really they're a team of gifted amateurs, very passionate, but they don't have money really, and they have to raise money for materials from wherever they can. And the fact is, primary producers just don't have the money to pay, the close to $1 million it takes to re-fence, an average property in our, well, some properties in our area and some of the ones that are affected. So, and fencing is a continuous investment that's done over decades in farming families, and so if you lose everything on one day, there's no way you can get back into action. Thanks, Councillor Bailey. So I have put 2 matters. One, that there be assistance as set out in paragraph A as a form of drought assistance, and secondly, that there be a facility provided by the state government to allow us to defer...
Time, Councillor O'Connor.
Yeah, can I just have a short extension?
No.
Well, it's self-evident.
Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I think it's a very good proposal, and I wholeheartedly agree with what we've seen is tremendous suffering. It's one of the worst droughts we've ever had. And we know that we need fences. We know we need to help these people get back on their feet again. So really we need to be doing all we can to help them, and just encouraging the state government to help as well, because they really do need help. As people who've been to the ABOR drought management thing say, they're really suffering, and we should be doing everything we can to help them. So I just commend this motion and hope that everybody is suffering hardship can get something out of this, and just impress on the state government how unusual these circumstances are, and that we really need to do whatever we can to help them.
Speaker against?
I have a question for the CEO.
Yes, Councillor.
In regards to Part A. Has that area been, may have already been mentioned, declared a national disaster area as of yet?
A drought area.
As a follow-up to that question, with declaration of drought area or once the fires sort of thing, a natural disaster area, will that bring forth with it any funding in regards from either state or federal government?
There are various state government funding for those who are fire affected and drought affected. I can't, and I'm not sure with the, oh sorry, I've got it here. Sorry, we are a natural, sorry, I've been advised that we have been declared a natural disaster, both state and federal. There are various state grants available to individual farmers and those affected in relation to stock replacement as well as infrastructure replacement. And I believe as late as today there's been an announcement in relation to replacement of stock and funding to support that.
Speaker against?
So this isn't against, but I'm just wondering if I could suggest a slight amendment in wording, in that that council, where it says council acknowledges the suffering and loss, I think it's the that council continues to acknowledge, because I think we're already doing the best that we can as a council, and to support this motion that it is a continuation of what we're already doing.
Councillor O'Connor, do you accept that?
Yes.
Councillor Robinson?
As long as you take the yes out of it.
It becomes part of the motion. Any speakers against? As there's been no speakers against the motion, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against? Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you for being so gentle.
Thanks, Councillor Bailey. Item 10.1, appointment of native title manager. A move and a seconder, please. Councillor Martin, Councillor Widders. Councillor Martin. Councillor Widders.
No, having had this clarified at the meeting on Monday, I'm happy with it.
Anyone wish to speak against? Okay, I'll put that to the motion, to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. No, not really. Item 10.2, the issue about local government elections September 2020. A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Robertson, Councillor O'Connor, Councillor Robertson.
No, I'll reserve the right of reply.
Councillor O'Connor. No, Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor O'Connor. Okay, anyone wish to speak against? Okay, I'll put that to vote. Those in favour? Carried. 12.1's done. 12.1, alteration of the parking time limits within the CBD. Councillor Widders, Councillor Gray.
12.1
did I? Okay. Do we miss 11?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, sorry. So, financial statements, 11.1. Thank you, Councillor Widders, for bringing that forward. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Gray, Councillor Bailey. Sorry, Councillor Bailey, before you start, I would like our finance officer just to go through it, clarify to all councillors. So through you, CEO.
Of course, our CFO, Kelly Stedworthy, if you wouldn't mind just giving an overview to the councillors, particularly since, unfortunately, the papers were late.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors, gallery. So we have in the agenda the draft 2018-19 financial statements. So these have been collated and they're now ready to refer to our external auditors, which is why the report's coming to you this evening. Prior to referring the statements to audit, they do need to be resolved by council and they need to be signed by the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, the CEO and the responsible accounting officer, which is myself. That particular process is set down in the Local Government Act and Regulation. There are two sets of financial statements that need to be signed off. We have the general purpose financial statements and special purpose financial statements. The difference between those two is the special purpose financial statements just cover the water and sewerage funds. The general purpose financial statements do have some disclosures relating to the different funds, but they're a consolidated result. The 18-19 financial year was a year where we did not have any major asset revaluations, and that's assisted in reducing the value of adjustments relating to non-current assets, which do sometimes impact the financial statement results. You'll see from the financial statements that are included, they did have a significant impact in the prior reporting period. The net operating result recorded in the income statement for the 30th of June was a $13.9 million surplus. The operating result before capital grants and contributions was a $2.3 million deficit. While there wasn't a major asset revaluation, we did still have some adjustments relating to non-current assets within the results for the 18-19 financial year. A key one was a review of the remediation asset and associated provision relating to the existing Armidale landfill. That provision has been revised from around $2.7 million to around $3.9 million. As a result, we've seen an overall increase in the operating expenditure relating to that of almost $2 million. It is a non-cash item, but that is the way we have to disclose it. There's also some impairment expenses that we recognised during the financial year relating to the disposal of infrastructure. And we also had recognised some impairment loss in relation to the valuation of the former Calora property, which occurred during last financial year. So the impairment line item that's on the income statement is a combination of those two impacts. The valuation and market feedback on the former Calora is less than what we carried in the asset register, and hence we are required to recognise the lower value in that case, resulting in a write-down and an associated loss. Those costs in total were around $2.5 million. So without the adjustments relating to non-current assets, the operating result before capital grants and contributions would have been a surplus. And we have seen an improvement in the underlying financial performance from the previous year. The improved result is noticeable when you compare it to the original budget, which is shown. We have to show the original budget. We are unable to show the revised budget position. And we had forecast a $3.8 million operating deficit originally for the 18-19 financial year. The concerted effort by the organisation to reduce operational spend and improve the operating result has yielded an improved operating and cash position. We can actually afford to put money in internal reserves to fund items such as capital carry forwards and required capital works. That was a position we were not able to be in at the end of last financial year, so that is a noticeable improvement. While the unrestricted cash position has not moved up greatly as at the 30th of June, it's moved from around $1.5 million in the previous year, as measured at 30th of June, to $1.85 million. When you include the internally restricted funds, there is a significant overall improved cash position. You will note an improvement in the unrestricted current ratio in the financial statements associated with that. Our internally restricted funds and internal reserves at the 30th of June 2018, the end of the previous reporting period, were around $4 million. That consisted of unrestricted cash of around 1.5 and an internal reserve for employee leave entitlements of around $2.5 million. We just met the Office of Local Government's minimum benchmark the previous year for our unrestricted current ratio. I focused on that ratio because it is important. It does represent Council's overall liquidity when we take into account all of our current assets and all of our current liabilities. At the 30th of June 2019, we have around $9.5 million in unrestricted cash and internal reserves. This is made up of a $3.2 million reserve for our employee leave entitlements, a $2.4 million reserve for capital carry forwards, and a $2.1 million in other internal reserves to help fund project commitments, as well as the $1.85 million in unrestricted cash. While the unrestricted cash level is less than what we had forecast in the revised budget, we have reviewed it and it is in line with the budget when we take into account the unbudgeted adjustments. So we budgeted for an increase in unrestricted cash for the 18-19 financial year based on the revised budget position of an increase of $4.5 million. Our actual result is around $4.1 million different to that budget. So that's the unrestricted cash level. The reasons for that: we hadn't received $1.6 million in airport land sales by the 30th of June. Those funds since have flowed through, but we weren't able to record them at the 30th of June. We had $1.5 million allocated to internal reserves at the end of the reporting period for 18-19 that we did not budget for. That is for capital works that we intend to undertake over the next 12 months, 2 years. We have recognised an increase of $673,000 in the ELE reserve, and we had transferred this year funds into a domestic waste management reserve as required under the legislation. We had not budgeted for that adjustment. It's around $607,000. As you're aware, the consolidated result needs to be considered by fund. We do have the fund results contained in the financial statements. They are contained in note 25. You'll also see in the following notes the key performance indicators associated with both the consolidated result and the fund results. Within the special purpose financial statements, the water and sewage results, they look okay, but the only feedback from the Audit and Risk Committee, who have reviewed these financial statements, is that there is a target benchmark return on capital that we should be aiming for, and we did not quite meet that in either of those funds, so that may require some review moving forward. The draft financial statements, as included in the agenda for Council tonight, there is a slight change in the final set that will be referred to audit. We did pick up that there was a misallocation in relation to the amount allocated to cash and investments. It will not change any overall financial results that Council's been provided with, but there'll just be some change in the line items in terms of the movement in the statement of cash flows. That revised version will be uploaded to the hub so that you can see what the final set referred to audit will be. In closing, the results that are being adopted tonight is for the purpose of referring them to external audit. So as such, at this time, they're unaudited results, they're draft results. However, I do recommend these reports to Council for endorsement.
Thanks, CFO. I put if there's any questions from the councillors for clarification. None? Okay, thanks very much. So, Councillor Bailey.
Mr Mayor, what an incredible turnaround. When you realise that we were elected on the 30th of June 2017 and our cash reserves and unrestricted diminished to a rather low amount, it was really, I think, a great foresight to employ a CEO who was so stringent in financial management, and we've seen a vast improvement in our position as a council. I think we should also pay tribute, because not long after Susan Law joined us, this person came down from Queensland, who we were, I think, all a bit apprehensive about, a Queenslander to tell us how to run financial management, and I think Kelly's done a great job, as has the senior leadership team, in turning this council around. to be in a situation where areas such as materials and contracts have reduced by approximately $2 million, and that includes all the consultants that we use from time to time, I think is quite incredible. Our employee costs have basically stayed static, and I think we're now on the path to a better position, and if we can maintain some stringent financial management over the next 12 months, the council that is elected September next year, I think will be in a position to be able to make some substantial improvements. So I'd like to congratulate the senior staff. I can remember at a meeting at Tinga, Councillor Mirat and I raised extreme concern about our financial position and moved a motion which was passed that we balance the budget, and it was ignored. And I'm so delighted now that we're in a position, we are in a strong financial position. So in moving the motion, I congratulate the CEO, the CFO and the senior management and the management of the council on getting us back into a strong financial position. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Dr Mayor. I was at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting when these financials were presented and went through them extensively. So it's a big thank you to our CFO for the work that has been done and the finance team as a whole. And I totally agree with Councillor Bailey's sentiments around well, it's not even a sentiment, it's the fact that the financial turnaround is a pivotal result of engaging our CEO, Susan Law, who is very financially savvy in what we needed to achieve. To be able to set, after the next council, whoever that is in 2020, set them up for a far greater success in delivering for this community. Also, that in noting that these statements are in line with the newly introduced accounting standards. Is that correct? Yeah, these ones? The structure of them. I just want to congratulate the finance team on that. This was a much easier to read and to understand set of financials, and ultimately to congratulate you on the immense amount of work that has been undertaken to get these statements together. Thank you.
Okay, speaker against? If not, I'll put to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Going back to item 12.1, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Widders, Councillor Councillor Gray. Councillor Widders.
12.1.
Yep.
Board. Yep, parking. Great to see this is back on the agenda. As I spoke to last time it came up, it came up because we as a council asked that the parking be looked at. What had come didn't pass, so hopefully the amendments that have been made in regards to the parking strategy and the tour that we took on the bus to alleviate some of the councillors' concerns have been alleviated, and that we can now adopt this parking strategy to get it into the ethos of the community around the hardcore and frame. Thanks.
Thank you. This parking study that came forward to around the CBD parking came to the Business Advisory Committee, and it was put forward as a recommendation from that committee that council consider and accept this parking study as outlined in the recommendation. And I want to congratulate the people on the Business Advisory Committee and thank them for their input in making this parking study and the alterations of the parking time become real and an achievable result for council.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor O'Connor, you wish to speak against the motion?
No, I would just like to propose an amendment to the motion, which is that at subparagraph B, little 3, the word reduce is changed to maintain.
So Councillor Ritters and Councillor Gray, you happy?
To maintain. You'll have to delete 2 hours as well. That's the
Councillor
proposed
Ritters and
amendment.
Councillor Gray, you no. So if you want this amendment, you'll have to get a seconder. So Councillor O'Connor?
Yeah. So, sorry, well, that's what it is. That's the proposal is that in relation to those 3 hour down to 2, we maintain those and delete. Oh, no, we don't have to delete. Just change the word from reduce to maintain and delete the last 3 words. So to maintain and delete that. Thanks.
Councillor Robertson? Councillor Robertson, Connor, your mic, please. Anyone wish to speak against the amendment?
She hasn't spoken for it yet.
I did ask Councillor O'Connor to speak for it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was not aware of that at all.
Well, you speak.
Well, I would like to speak to it, Mr. Mayor. I've been on this council since was on the former Armidale Demerit Council where we spent a lot of time concerning the exact same space. May have been a different council, but it was exactly the same space, and I can tell you there's a persistent cry from the community then, and I anticipate now if we take away those 3 hour street spaces, the reason is that there are some people in our community who are disabled or encumbered with elderly folk or very young children who do need to do business, and it takes them in the heart of the city, and it does take them longer to do their task because of their disability or because of their, accompanying or assisting either small children or the elderly. And there's a lot of that caring going on in the community, and I note that it's often been a gender-based debate in the past, in that the men seem to think, we can all just do it all in 2 hours. But if you're dragging 3 or 4 kids in a stroller or a very elderly person around helping them to do their business, the 3 hours is what's required. So I don't have any issues with the rest of the amendments, but I do think that there is a need for the 3 hours spots to be maintained. And I think it's generally acknowledged that the parking works reasonably well. I'm informed that the basis of sort of insisting on this uniformity within the different zones is based on a consultant's opinion, but I've just been in, I think there'll be an outcry if we lose those 3 hour spaces, and I would love, until such time as we've actually nailed down our master plan for the whole town area, that we maintain what we've got there, save ourselves a lot of grief and the community.
Thanks, Councillor O'Connor. Your mic again, please. Councillor Robertson?
Yes, I think this is a case of if it's not broken, don't try and fix it. And I certainly agree with most of the proposals here that they were broken in the sense that there were a whole host of complicated time limits for the on-street parking. The question really is for the off-street car parks, which are all pretty simple. They're all now 3 hours. And there are environmental issues. The only thing I ever hear about the off-street car parks is that people are always rushing out to move the cars. I've never ever heard that there is a real shortage of spaces. The main thing I hear is that people are rushing. They haven't enough time, so they rush out, they move the cars, and then they go back again. And this seems to be a waste of time and effort for everyone concerned. And it's also bad for the environment because you're cold starting an engine, you're moving it maybe 5 or 6 spaces to another space in the same car park. So it's basically a case of, you know, musical car spaces, as you might say. Why would we bother unless there's a real issue and a real need for it? And I've never ever seen a real need for it. So the question really is, why are we doing it? And I certainly did raise this at our workshop, and it may be something that once we know what the occupancy rates are, we may be able to do something and make a more sensible decision. But at the moment, we just don't have how many times their car parks are full and there isn't a space, and we really need to get people to move their cars to somewhere else at a completely different car parking space. And there will be very, very shortly another opportunity to look at this whole issue and look at the whole issue of transport into the CBD, because this is the real issue. We're doing a master plan on the CBD and the Creekland, and an essential part of that master plan is going to have to be transport. How do you get into the CBD? Do we want to encourage environmentally friendly transport? Do we want to encourage cycling and reduce the pollution? Do we want to encourage walking and make the whole place a much better place to live and work? Do we perhaps even want to have paid parking? And for some of the outer areas for all day, because some people probably think that, you know, 3 or 4 hour parking, if that's, and actually pay for it, might be a better option. None of these things have really been explored in our transport plans up to now. We've employed consultants from out of town who've got completely different standards and really don't understand the issues of a rural town. So I think what we should be doing is looking at all the ideas for off-street parking as a whole thing, and particularly when we get the Kmart car park back, if that's what we're going to do, and the underground car parks, is the whole thing should be considered together rather than piecemeal. So if we do that, if we look at it as part of our master plan, then we'll get the best possible options for our community instead of making a decision now when we really haven't seen the entire vision for our area. So I would certainly like to see this remain at 3 hours until we've completed our master plan, because I think that would be the best possible way forward for our community. And I hope other people will agree with it, because I know, and I've seen the reports on what happened before, that when the previous council did change it to 2 hours, there was an awful lot of annoyance and an awful lot of hassle and an awful lot of complaints. And really, we don't want to do that. We want to look at the whole picture and decide and get something we can really defend. It would make sense altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Any speaker against? Councillor Gray?
Speaking against the amendment, is that I understand where Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Robinson are coming from. The other side of this coin is that the report that came through for the parking study did have significant feedback and input from the business people within the CBD. Now, part of that feedback was that a lot of the parking spaces that are 3 hours are being used by people that are working within the CBD. And yes, they go out and move their car after, before the 3 hours is up, and then back into the same spot or back into the other. And that they were consistently getting people, general shoppers, if you like, that would not go into the mall, would not go into other CBD areas because they struggled to find parking spaces. The parking spaces were being taken up by employees working within the CBD. So, so in taking on board the feedback from fellow councillors, I'm wondering if there is a compromise that could be made to say that that there is at least one of those parking spaces to remain at 3 hours, and the rest to be reduced to 2 hours.
So that's going to be an amendment by you, Councillor Gray? No. Can't be. So, a speaker for the amendment? So there is an amendment which is up there, maintain all council 3 hour off-street spaces. So the right of reply goes back to Councillor Widders. So item in our code of meeting practice 10.21, a councillor other than the move of the original motion has the right to speak once. Oh, sorry, 12. Where was it? Oh, was there somewhere? Bear with us, councillors. Okay, I'll make a ruling at the moment because we still can't find it, but I'll just make a ruling that Councillor O'Connor, sorry, Councillor Widders, this stage, you have the right to reply.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be very brief. I don't want to labour the point, but I do really want to emphasise, I appreciate Councillor Gray's intent to make a compromise, but I think part of what this whole new strategy is to try and keep uniformity as far as possible. And I think what we can do is that if we have all those off-street spaces that people have known for a long time as being 3 hours, we're not going to disrupt people, and to sort of change some and not others is going to be even more confusing. Look, I just know from experience that there is a need in the community, and if we go down to 2 hours, it's just going to mean that people who jump up from their desks every 3 hours will be jumping up every 2 hours, and reducing productivity if they are full-time workers. I think I don't have a problem finding parking in those areas for 3 hours, and it's essential, actually. It's just essential to have some 3-hour parking in that area for, as I said, people with limited mobility or other issues, or who have a number of business appointments to undertake, or even retail ones. So please, just the other thing I think we need to bear in mind is that we are a hub for a regional area, and we want to encourage people to feel good about coming into our CBD and into the heart of our CBD where most of our shops are, so and offices and services. So I'm just asking councillors to please support this small retention of the off-street 3-hour time zones. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put that amendment.
Hang on, I have a question, and it's around the procedure of it. As I said to Councillor Bailey, it seems to happen a fair bit when I have right of reply, so I'm a little bit confused. If the mover of the motion doesn't agree with the amendment, do they have to wait until their last right of reply, or are they allowed to speak against the amendment?
Yes, you were allowed to speak against the amendment, but I did ask if...
missed me turn.
Yeah,
that's right.
And it is correct. I do apologise, Councillor Widders, that it is in our code of meeting practice that the mover of the original motion does have the right to reply to any amendment. But we've done it, so my apologies.
That's right.
So I'll put that to the amendment to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? Amendment lost. So back to the original motion. Councillor Gray, you foreshadowed a... Leave it as is. Is there anyone wish to speak against the motion?
I just want to say the obvious.
Councillor Widders, your right to reply then?
Awesome. That's all right. I did want to just to quickly address the issues that were raised in the amendment. It was one of the same issues that were brought up last time. And the change in the 3-hour parking for those areas with the issues that were raised by both Councillor O'Connor and Robinson, if they were isolated changes, and it was only those car parking spaces that were being changed, I would totally agree with what they're saying. In regards to Councillor O'Connor's comment about parents with children or elderly or disabled people needing to get in and out. I'm not sure whether the disabled parkings have time limits or anything else like that, so they're available and a bit more closer to town. And as someone who, for a majority of my adult life, has had to cart children around in and around town, I think already the available 3-hour spaces and the ones with the parenting parking are a lot closer to where the needs of what parents would a majority of the time need to go to, whether it's the underground park, so they're out of the rain and got a bit more time to in the sun to get their kids in and out safely, or the parenting parking spots closer to the doors at the supermarkets and stuff like that. So adding in the fact that there is still adequate 3-hour parking within the CBD, it's just not controlled by the council at the moment, as mentioned by Councillor Robinson. I think the community is concerned the fact that if they were the only 3-hour parks that we had, there would be concerns, but because there's still a fair amount of 3-hour parking in the CBD, I think those issues and the fact that, as I said, the whole area is getting changed, the times are getting changed to make it more fair and efficient to get the flow of traffic back. And as I said, you can remember when it used to be a struggle to even get a park down there when Beatty Street was a two-way street. You could be stuck there for a fair bit just trying to get through there. So we're fairly lucky with where we are now with the amount of parks that we've got for the amount of traffic that actually goes through there.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Widders. I'll put that to the vote. The motion, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Item 12.2, adoption of local approval policy street trading. Movers, Councillor Gray, Councillor Munn, Councillor Gray.
This was another policy that came through the Business Advisory Committee, and I am mentioning that even though the committees have uniting, that this is the calibre that will be of decision makers, of policy input people for council. This is the calibre of skills that we can have from representatives of the Armidale-Guyra Business Chamber, who extensively went through this and put up the recommendation for it to go on public display as well, to support it going on public display. So no more to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Martin.
No comment, thanks.
A speaker against? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Item 12.3, which is Project 030. Can I have a mover, Councillor?
I move. I was my hand.
Hang on. Oh, Councillor Robinson. I couldn't understand, Councillor Widders. You had your hand up. Councillor Robinson. Councillor Widders. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, no, I just want to add another slight phrase with the approval of the seconder, which is that after Project 030, add and aim for no additional contribution from our region to the global temperature rise by 2030. No, after Project Zero on the previous line. So it was just, yeah. Okay, so, and then, and aim for no. And aim for no additional contribution from our region to the global temperature rise by 2030. And you have to spell global right. Global.
Robinson, didn't you have a word aim in there?
And aim, yeah.
Sorry.
And aim, yeah. Sorry.
So after...
Instead of in, it should be aim. Aim for. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking right. I know. Well, I could try differently, you know.
So, Councillor Robertson, that's the amendment you'd like?
Yes, please.
Councillor Widders as a seconder? Yeah. Councillor Robertson.
Well, I think this is a really wonderful project. It's a joint initiative by our council and uni to help our environment and generate economic benefits. There's research leadership at uni, PhD students, a citizen science research project innovation network with community groups, residents, buildings and government all working together for the future of this region. And as the report explains, UNI's contribution includes the provision of Kirby Station, New Home, the Talimba feedlot and the Smart Farm for research, development and extension activities. There'll be opportunities to work with land care on regenerative agriculture and tree planting. On livestock emissions, that's been a substantial part of my research over the past 10 years. And now it's a very opportune time to seek funds from the Meat and Livestock Authority, goal of getting the red meat industry becoming carbon neutral by 2030. So it really fits in beautifully with the aims of the MLA. And there's also ideas on microhydro, waste to energy, emissions from on-farm dams, biochar, carbon farming, climate adaptive pastures, and developing the best strategies to predict and deal with climate change, including devastating droughts. And we all know how important this is for our community. Monday's World Meteorological Organization report said that in the last 5 years was the hottest 5 years on record, and that climate change is accelerating with sea levels rising, CO2 levels increasing, and ice sheets melting faster than ever before. So it's a very serious problem. And my slight rewording was simply to express the stated aim to become carbon neutral by 2030 in a way that makes more sense to the average person. And I have talked to David Mirren on Friday about this, and also today, and he's very, very happy with this change because we've both agreed we want to stabilise the global temperature rise by 2030. Temperatures, of course, will increase and they'll continue to rise because of past emissions. But if we can slow down that increase, we'll reduce the risk of passing a climate tipping point that could lead to irreversible climate change. So I commend to you this wonderful, innovative project, and I really hope it's going to bring the jobs and growth to this region that we all hope it will be, and also do something to help our environment.
Thanks, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Witters.
Yeah, what a timely motion to be put forth by the council. I commend them for their vision in regards to this area, considering so many people voiced their concerns with their attendance at different rallies throughout the world last week or the week before in regards to climate strike and climate change. I think the time for debate on whether the climate is changing is over. Those that still want to debate, sit in your own circle while the rest of us move on and start looking for proactive initiatives. And a lot of questions have been asked, well, what sort of proactive initiatives are people doing around climate strike? Are they planting trees or the silly old things? Well, here's one from the council and the UNE, which I commend, in actually looking to do something in regards to it. And, well, people can say, well, it's only one council. Well, the journey of 1,000 steps starts with one, and if we're the leaders in regards to this, and then we encourage the rest of our neighbouring councils, who then encourage their neighbouring councils, who then encourage their neighbouring councils, may encourage our state and may encourage our federal governments to follow suit in regards to this. So I would really, really like to see this expand and continue to grow on. And as I said, if we have to be the leaders in regards to initiatives like this, then let's all take that leadership by the horns and charge full steam ahead into creating a better future for our younger generations.
Thank you, Councillor Witters. Is there a speaker against? If not, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Councillors, we're moving on to 13.1. Just before I call for mover and seconder, may I correct something down in towards the bottom? You got a number of dot points there. the vacation care, $60 a day at current rate. The proposed rate is not $60 but $62. So if you just want to correct your funds. So can I have a move and a second, please? Councillor Tiley, Councillor Gilletley. Councillor Tiley? Councillor Gilletley? Any wish to speak against? Otherwise, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Yep. Now, councillors, items 13.2 to 17.1 are for all information. I'd like to take them in globo if someone would like to move. Councillor Murat, Councillor Gray, those in favour? Carried. So moving on to 17.2. Oh, sorry. Councillor, we just have to go slow for a second. Are you right? Did you get the move and seconder? Good. Move and Councillor Tiley. Do you want to move? Councillor Tiley, Councillor Murat. Councillor Tiley? 17.2. Councillor Murat? No. Okay, anyone speak against? All those in favour? Carried. Did you get that, Harry? Yep. And we've done 17.3. So, questions on notice have been answered. There's no confidential matters. So, I would like to close the meeting at, 18:31. Thank you very much for attending.